I guess many years ago, in another life, David and I worked together in Brussels. I met him when he was working in another school. He was a fourth grade teacher, I think, but as a fourth grade teacher, he'd come up with the idea of a journal of innovative teaching. I think that was the right name, David, yeah?
Yep.
And they wanted the local kind of regional heads association to back it. And so CGC, ISB was all over that. I thought it was a great idea. So I think the first volume of this publication was packed with articles from ISB people, IS Brussels. And it was really, really, really good. I mean, it made educational leadership look kind of shabby. So, you know, I was thinking, well, if this guy can do this while teaching fourth grade, and I think, David, with your kids, you'd also made a lot of the marketing materials for the school itself. Is that right also?
Yeah. We couldn't afford in those days any budget for marketing, so we got the fourth grade students to create the DVD in those days.
Yeah, so once I realized David had an interest in child slavery, you know, I thought that this guy's going to be interesting. So it's got a long story short, you know, Jim Collins' book, Good to Great, First Who Then What, was determined to at some point get David on the team, and he did eventually join us, which was great. We spent many years together, working together. In that time, I think Brussels grew into a good, inclusive school. But a lot of the impact we had was honestly on the way we told that story, and that was really in the hands of David and his team. So I'll say no more about that because he'll talk about it. So we're going to talk about the power of storytelling and the storytellers of the school, the admissions, the alumni, marketing, communications, development, that whole suite of services that are absolutely vital to a school's success as a learning organization. This particular slide has taken many, many hours of construction. It's framed around that hedgehog with a cup there. It's probably a cup of hot Marmite or something. Because Dave and I did a campaign once about hedgehogs from Jim Collins, the hedgehog principle. Maybe at some point you'll be lucky enough to see it. It's probably a framed in some museum of advertising ideas. It was derided by all of our colleagues, but we liked it. So I thought we'd start with a hedgehog. So the idea of simple storytelling. Okay, so we have two sets of presentations today. One is from a wonderful team in Montcrest, Michael and Natalie and Andrea, who I've just been speaking to. That's how good my memory is. So they're going to talk about telling the learning story by being deeply embedded with that learning story with Jerry and the rest of the team in Montcrest in Toronto. And then they're going to hand straight over to David and Suzanne, who've now decided to form their own company to support schools in getting themselves noticed. So I'm going to stop sharing and I'm going to stop talking. I'm going to hand over to Michael and you take it from here. Thanks, guys.
Thanks so much, Kevin. Anyway, we're just really excited to be here today. When Jerry first reached out to us, I think it was over March break or just at the end of March break, our spring break in Canada. And she told us that we had an opportunity to come and talk with our CGC colleagues. We thought it'd be a great opportunity to come and join today. We've all been a part of Y Lead. So we had this opportunity in the past to work with some of you actually through Y Lead, and then also to just to connect. So what we wanted to do today was, again, just to talk a little bit about our storytelling and the journey that we've been on. We're going to start off with Natalie and Andrea really talking about the admissions process, how they've set things up back before we really had the work with CGC and the clarity around some of our work and how that's evolving and changing. Then I'm going to pause and talk a little bit about, again, how I see that arc and the overview and how that affected things like our communications, and then give some specifics about how we've started to see some changes and growth in the way we're doing things. And then a little bit about just a quick look to the future. And then part of that future, again, of course, the CGC, and then also the work we've done recently with Yellow Car. So I'll turn it over to Natalie to get us started.
Thank you, Michael. So nice to see you all. Thank you for listening to what we have to share today, and we hope it's helpful. Andrea Mercer is the Associate Director of Admissions at Montcrest, and I'm the Director of Admissions, and we work extremely closely together to tell the story of our school. And super excited to share how this has evolved over the course of our 4 years together. Excuse me. I joined Montcrest just a year before Andrea, and then, but the majority of our journey has been together. So, Michael, if you want to flick the first slide up, and I apologize for the amount of text, but I did this so that you could take it away and hopefully just look back at this if you need to. But one of the things that we really grappled with as new people to working at Montcrest in admissions was this notion of what is the story of this school. I've worked in leadership in lots of schools, and this was probably the most challenging for me to really get to grips with. Michael, you can flick to the next slide if you like. So Andrea and I really were working on this, trying to find this common thread of what Montcrest really is about. What story are we telling? And we struggled with this because depending on who you spoke to, the story was quite different at Montcrest. And we really wanted to hone in on, excuse me, who the school is, what the school does authentically, and tell the real story so we could bring the right people, because there had been some misalignment with bringing the right people in and who was there. So we were asking these 4 questions all the time, every day, and trying to get, this common perception, this common language. So we really worked hard to define this, and we focused very much on the things that we thought were very prevalent, and it wasn't lots. I have to say, it was basically the relationship-based approach and the personalized approach to student learning. Once CGC was launched at Montcrest, it was like, oh my goodness, because we immediately started to feel that we had a framework with which we could all begin to operate. And I think that Andrea is going to speak to how this has specifically impacted our work, but the fact that we have been able to take the essence of Montcrest and co-create as a team. I know that kind of sounds a bit fluffy, but we have authentically co-created some principles, and then use this to inform our practices, by which we can all now effectively tell this story of our school. It's just been so magical. And that has meant that our admissions work is incredibly impactful, because we now have a team, which is the whole school, to tell the same story. And not only are we telling the same story, we can rely on everyone telling the story. We are really beginning to get to grips with this common language. And there are so many examples now of the story to tell, now that we know what the story is. So we are going to talk specifically about a couple of things that have been impacted. And Andrea will speak to those, and I'll just talk about a leadership opportunity at the end. But Andrea, do you want to take over? And Michael, go to the next slide.
Great. Thanks so much, Natalie. Hi, everyone. I'm Andrea Mercer. So yes, as Natalie was saying, having this framework through the CGC to serve to sort of build the admissions experience around intentionally has really transformed what admissions looks like. As Natalie mentioned, previously there was this relationship-based piece, but as that evolved in through what we determined as an entire school community, our principles to be, we had our people principle and our purpose principle, and we really started to see how those effectively tied into the work that we were doing in admissions, what we were already doing, and then what we could also evolve to do. So some of this, obviously, with these video images we have here, I'll just speak specifically to what they are in a minute, evolved because of COVID, but ended up being quite impactful and very aligned with the people principle and how that was alive and well in admissions. So one of the things is on the left side of the screen here with Natalie with the Hello Eva, we did personal videos for all of our students who received offers. So not just a letter, but they actually received a video from us that recounted moments from the assessment that we had one-on-one together, had little video stills of the student either engaged in work or from a video they had sent in as part of the application process, really making them feel seen and personalized. Before we even got to the offer process, we also were doing creating personal videos for students for their assessments. Now, those were often in small groups for some grades, for some were individual, but the videos themselves, once again, detailed exactly what they could expect. It was my face or Natalie's face being friendly, welcoming, explaining who we were, that they would meet us. So when they came to meet us for the assessment, it wasn't the first time they were seeing us. We captured the 4 truths and a lie there because that was a little piece that we introduced in our assessment process for students to share a little bit about themselves. And we played this game with them at the start of the assessment. Yes, as an icebreaker, but also once again, getting to know a little bit more about the student as a person and establishing that relationship before just diving into the assessment work. And then on the back end, you see these smiling faces of new Montcrest students who received a welcome gift from us with a welcome note from the ambassadors. And then on the other side of that, you see our ambassadors who were hard at work prepping swag bags. And one of my roles at Montcrest is to run the Student Ambassadors program, and that has been so crucial in, I think, driving what the admissions process felt like for families and current students. When we talk about the ownership principle, you know, our current students taking ownership of the role that they can play in that process and the impact that they have. So they not only helped with prepping the bags, but they also wrote little personal messages to our new students. They weren't also just doing, you know, as Kevin mentioned earlier, child labor. They were also involved in designing some of our events. And I think, Natalie, if you want to, is that the next slide? If we have, do you want to pop?
Michael, to flick to the next slide. I want to add.
Oh, sure. Yes, please.
Yeah, I'm going to add in one thing as well, just to on the back of what you're saying, because the really important thing about CGC and is that Andrea and I focused during COVID on what do we want people to feel when they go through the admissions process. We want them to feel the school, the authentic school. So we were working on the essence of what the school really is and aiming for people to feel that through the admissions process. CGC didn't change anything. It built on the great bits of our school. So we didn't have to then redo things because we are building this framework with CGC. We built on that, which was amazing, but had the language, the common language to talk about it. So it's like all the bits that were great are growing, and we didn't have to change things. We might have thrown some things to the wayside that were like that we don't have enough why for that anymore. But yeah, I just wanted to add that in. Thanks, Andrea.
Thanks, Natalie. No, that's fantastic addition. And I think, you know, to your point, we talked a lot about wanting to make sure that the way families felt about Montcrest after going through the admissions experience was what they would experience in the school. I actually just got an email yesterday from a mom whose daughter just joined us in grade 6 this year. And she said she just had some sort of a technical question about grade 7. And she said, I just wanted to let you know that Addie has absolutely loved grade 6. It has been everything you said it would be and more. And I just thought that is such wonderful validation of the alignment we have between what we are saying Montcrest is in admissions and what it actually turns out to be. So the students were directly involved in many parts of our admissions process, not just by us saying, hey, come do this for us, but actually actively involving them in creating and designing what these events would look like and what their role would be like in those events. So this first example here is we have of some of our younger students actually touring 2 of our visiting applicants in the library. And this was very organically, you know, imagined. It wasn't something where they had a lot of prep and a lot of rehearsal and practice on what they were going to say. They very naturally engaged with the applicants and asked them what they wanted to see and took them to those places and then showed them what they thought was important in those spaces. This could have very easily been Natalie or myself leading the applicants around and telling them about the school. But in this case, we have 2 current grade 2 students showing these grade 3 applicants around. We also had, at the beginning of the year, we invited current families who were already enrolled, who hadn't really had a chance to visit campus because of COVID, to do some weekend walkabouts. And our grade 6 to 8 ambassadors were involved in creating videos that we connected to QR codes that were posted in all the buildings. So while the tours were self-guided with the parents' own children, there were these QR codes they could scan to watch videos that the ambassadors did. And I did very little by way of telling them what they needed to say about the buildings. They simply were in their groups and were assigned a building, and the end product was really quite astounding. They surpassed my expectations. And I find that very often when you hand it over to the kids, they will rise to the occasion and they will surpass your expectations. The lower slide there is an example of an event that, well, actually, I'll come to that one last because I think that leads to the next slide better. Over on the right-hand side, we have our Mustang Sally, our Montcrest Mustang. That is actually a student is inside that costume in that picture with two of our other ambassadors. And that was at our more recent campus tours for new families that are enrolling this year. And that was our photo booth that we set up on the pitch, and the kids completely ran that themselves. So the student in the middle there was sort of the photo booth manager and was taking photos. The student in blue there was the hype person for the photo booth, and they were out there on their own with very little direction, encouraging new families to engage with the Mustang and make a moment out of the visit. Rather than just come a tour, we had a little reception on the pitch and this moment that was conceived of and executed by the kids. And then finally, that last still there is from Meet the Students, which was an event that sort of arose out of COVID. You know, we used to have this general open house, and that format just obviously didn't work. So we evolved into several Meet the events. And this was one of them. And I think maybe we'll pop to the next slide, Natalie, since that is sort of where we start to go into a bit more detail about the Meet the events. And so, you know, the Meet the events was really where we took that people principle and said, how can we ensure that prospective families are feeling the entirety of Montcrest, and not just an open house, a virtual open house where they maybe walk through the school and see what's going on in class one day virtually. That's one part of Montcrest, but that isn't really giving them an opportunity to engage with the people. So we devised Meet the events, Meet the students, Meet the parents, and Meet the teachers. And the ambassadors were heavily involved with Meet the Students. And we co-created what they would talk about. They came up with their own Montcrest top 5, what they felt were the top 5 things that were important to share about Montcrest. And they volunteered to have highlighted speakers speak to each of those. Those speakers wrote their 1 to 2 minute commentary themselves. I did some very, very slight editing with them. So again, it wasn't me sitting down saying, this is what we're going to talk about. These are the things prospective families need to know about the school. It was coming organically from the students. And so that's not only allowing prospective families to hear authentically from our students, but it's also building relationship within that ambassador group. And because this was quite early in the year, and I think gave them a lot of confidence in taking on this leadership opportunity. But again, these Meet the events were focused on helping give prospective families access to feel the relationships that are the foundation of the CGC at Montcrest. And Natalie, I don't know if you want to add anything else to the Meet the...
I think just one thing about the ambassadors, like Andrea probably would never be able to give herself the credit that she deserves, but Andrea created this ambassador program that was very student-led, driven, created, because she wanted them to have a lead. So it's part of our leadership program. She wanted them to have an authentic leadership program where they not only represented the school, but they created all the way. So they created the ideas for the social media content. They created how they would run events, what they'd say, what's the best kind of event, and then also the content. But similarly to that, we had an event with an organization called Our Kids in Toronto a little while ago, and it was a virtual event. And what we realized from this event was we had a group of parents who very kindly offered to represent the school and ask questions from prospective families. And it really blew up this idea that nobody's talking about the school in the same way. They all understand the school to be something quite different. And despite conversations beforehand, common themes, it was such an enlightening experience. So we realized that we are going to have to work with our parents to really understand what they know, what they don't know, and what they feel they want to share, and then formulate this into an event that really is an authentic sharing of Montcrest and people learning about what kind of parents are here. Is this my vibe? Am I, is this where I want to bring my kids? So with the Meet the Parents event, we had a panel and we co-created themes and content whilst enabling them to learn about where the school was at certain places. The beautiful thing that was happening was Jerry was also working with the parents building this common language around the principles and the practices, the direction of the school that's taking in consideration who we are, this foundation of relationships and personalized learning, but adding all of the things that we do and all the content and so much to talk about curriculum wise, and academic wise and co-curricular wise, all the things we needed to talk about that we never could get a clear picture. All these things are coming together. So the process was so fantastic. The process has been so amazing. And what it's done has brought our community closer in terms of like school-wide. So our parents feel a lot more invested. Our students have had the time of their life in the ambassador program this year. They keep showing up on weekends when I'm sure they've got better things to do to run ambitious events. And it's a massive testament to this process. So Michael, you can flick to the last screen if you want here, and Andrea and I will kind of tag team on this, and this is our last bit. One of the final things that we've really had the benefit of experiencing is the leadership that's come from the whole of the faculty. We, through doing the Y Lead component of CGC, we have been able to see these beautiful teacher leadership personalities emerge. But what, from an admissions team, we've been able to do is rely on people talking about things in the framework of the principles and the practices. We haven't got to think, oh my gosh, what's going to be said? Is it this or is it that? Like, we've not having to spend time briefing people about what we do. They know what we do because they co-created it and they're living it now, which is, I know lots of schools are already doing this, but Montcrest was not there yet. And so we have an example here of our kindergarten information session, which was actually to a feeder preschool that we're trying to get their kids from. And the kindergarten team, who have been a real amazing group that have been very much on board with CGC, we're already living a lot of those things, but have benefited from the pulling together with the principles and the practices. We're able to take that and create this fantastic presentation that in no way have we ever had the kindergarten program talked about. So that was like, amazing shiny moment. And similarly with our middle school information session, another group of teachers who've really emerged as leaders through this process, using the CGC language as a framework for how they talk about our school has been absolutely groundbreaking for us. So we are now on much more of a common ground. The process has put our faculty and our community in a much better place. And we still have so much work to do, but we feel that we are really growing together through the process. And with that, I think I'll hand over to Michael. Andrea, unless you want to add anything else.
No, I think we'll go to Michael. That's great. I'm just watching our time too. So yeah.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah, because we'll watch, because we don't want to run into too much of a yellow car. Thanks, guys. So what I wanted to do when I was kind of reflecting, and as we were all working on the slides and thinking about what we wanted to talk about today, one of the things that made sense for me a lot was thinking about the arc of this connection and the storytelling arc and sort of a timeline of how things have been. And so even though it dates back to even earlier times, I felt like it was important because I think it really has an impact on where we've been and where we're going, as Natalie and Andrea have been talking about. And so what I want to do is just kind of step back all the way to 2019-20. And that was a year in which we had a new head of school. And one of the things we were really leaning into was our work on the third path. And Natalie spoke about that earlier, how Montcrest was really focused on those relationships. And that's one of the things that Natalie and Andrea highlighted in their admissions work, was trying to help people feel that. The other thing we started to do then on a sort of communications front was we started to work with a group called Key Gordon, so an outside agency. And we worked with a focus group of faculty members and parents to create a new positioning statement. And that came to be during that school year. Then what happened was that next summer after, and then COVID hit in March of that year. So we were in the midst of a new headship and then this new vision for articulating who we are. And then COVID hit. And then some important things happened over that summer. Over that summer, we had a change in one of our leadership positions around teaching and learning. And then Jerry joined our team. And one of the things that happened, it was in August of that school year, the beginning of 2020-21, Jerry and Matthew started really working together. And through that year, there was a real purposeful connection between looking at our learning and teaching practices. What are we actually doing, as Natalie and the team were saying, and trying to make sure that was aligned with our positioning statement and the things we were saying or marketing about who we are as a school. And they had really started to connect those pieces together very importantly. Then what started to happen towards the end of that year was the CGC partnership started to be seeded. And it started off with Jerry working with a couple key people in the school. Then she started to lead our connection of the leadership team in the school, understanding what the CGC was. And then we really started to embed that into the coming year. And I think one of the things that were key was that we really embedded this work with the CGC in our actual practices in the school. So our Montcrest Mondays, which are professional development sessions, consistently have CGC connections there. Why Lead was another really important piece because it went from a smaller group of leaders to a much wider group of leaders, having a deep understanding of the work with CGC and that connection. And then it really allowed us to really reflect on who we were as a school and then better articulate who we are and how we're doing our work. This year, as we continue through the 21-22 year, we really have focused on clarifying our learning principles, our portrait of a Montcrest learner, and then also some work in our DEI area, as well as our small class program has been another area of focus, really trying to define those things. And so as we look to the future, what we're able to do now, and I'll show some examples, is we've really, with this clarity of messaging and this clarity of who we are, start to share that more openly in our communications. And then I think another piece as we look to the future is continuing that partnership with the CGC. And then more recently, we've started into working with Yellowcar and having them help us out as well. So just wanted to share a few details. So in our marketing communications, one of the things we've started to do is this spring is to be able to start to integrate some of those key messages. So when we think of things like highlighting these innovative creators, parts of our, our emerging messages. Sorry for the noise.
Mr. Redison, please call.
School message, sorry. So starting to kind of integrate then our key messages that we have from our positioning statement, but also blending in now the work that we have both from our learning principles, our portrait of a Montcrest learner, and again, our DEI work as well. So we start to make sure that as we're putting out our social media and different things that we're communicating those things and blending those messages in. Another example is in a more recent project. So over a couple of weeks ago, we had 3 days of shooting at the school. So we were working on our new marketing video for the school. And as we were planning this chart on the left, what that is our table where as we worked as a team, when we thought about this, what we were doing is making sure that overall we had the arc of what the Montcrest experience was about, this idea of children becoming who they're meant to be and us providing the carefully crafted journey to help do that. But then taking a look at our key messages in orange and then aligning them with our learning principles in the school. And then as we looked at those learning principles, then aligning those with the types of things that we wanted to be sure we communicated and captured in the video. And so then as we work towards the production and the editing process, we'll continue to make sure we highlight those and really have those learning principles shine through as an important part. Again, another thing we're trying to do is much like the admissions team is to try and make sure you're actually living the principles. And I think that's been really important too, is to try and make sure that, again, those learning principles that are part of who we are, we're living through our experiences too. So it's really helped to have a clearer vision and a language that we're continuing to use throughout the school. In working with others, it's been really helpful to when everyone else knows those learning principles and understands the why much more clearly when we go to work together. They understand the why, and they also have a better understanding of what types of things, what we're trying to tell the story of when we go to talk with teachers and to plan the kinds of things we would want to have in the video. There's much more clarity and alignment with why we would be showing certain things and highlighting those as we tell the story. Another key piece too is, of course, having all those leaders in the school, those people who have been a part of Why Lead in particular, has really helped because, again, there's more people that you can work with as you're going to do things like, as Natalie mentioned, with our kids. In the past, where we've had community members and stakeholders get involved in interviews to help support some of our marketing, there wasn't as much vision, there wasn't a clarity of vision around who we are, and the stories were different. What's started to happen now is there's a much greater alignment of exactly who we are. And then when we are working then together with other community members telling the stories of Montcrest, it really shines through and speaks more clearly. Nat, I don't know if you want to jump in here as well as we talk about things. But the other thing is, again, our Power of Moments work has been really validated. So we recently participated over the last month or two with Yellowcar. So they, as they've been setting up their work, they reached out to us and asked if we wanted to be a part of their school experience audit. And we took advantage of that, and it's been a great experience. So we started to work with David and Suzette. And what we were able to do was participate, and they'll tell you in more detail about some of their process, but we took part in their Yellow Cars school experience audit. And what we found was it really helped to validate some of the things that we were already doing. So there was work led by Natalie and our retention committee. Natalie had led our retention committee over the last few years and really talked about the power of moments. Natalie, I don't know if you want to speak about that for a second.
Well, I don't want to take up too much time. I mean, basically the book, which I have here, so everybody probably knows this book, but we use this to guide our retention work. And as a SAT team, we realized that there was a distinct lack of intention with so many things, but also tied into who we are and what we're doing. And there was a lack of why for a lot of things. So we felt like the first thing we needed to do was really bring to light with our senior leadership team the fundamentals that are addressed in the Power of Moments. So we worked through the book as a group over a course of a year and really used it to highlight some of the areas that we were seeing in our retention work, you know, why people were leaving, why they were choosing to go to another school, and, you know, the kind of attrition that we could impact. We really wanted to work on that. And the Yellow Car survey was so valuable because it reinforced those things that we've discovered through our retention committee work, but it's also really helping to drive home those things that we need to still work on in the student experience. And it was great to know that what we were doing was kind of along the right lines, but it's brought a bit more of a sense of urgency to the fact that we still need to work on some key things. That's me.
Michael, I'll just jump in. I think one of the most important things, so for someone who works more on the academic side of things and bridge the gap between the operations team, so in terms of the people who've spoken today, the most important thing is that teachers feel that the stories that are being told are their stories. So the idea that this process of marketing and communicating about what the school is doing, making sure that teachers truly feel that they have been part of the process of creating all of these pieces. The slide decks that Natalie showed and the series of slide decks we're now building for each grade and area of the school, teachers are the ones creating this themselves based on the experiences they know that they actually authentically live in their classrooms with their students. So the idea that this isn't an act of telling a story that's not lived, it's something that truly deeply lives within the classrooms and has always been true. So it's just elevating those beautiful moments that have always existed, but giving it a structure and giving it a framework so that there is really a common ground in the way that we're moving forward. So I just wanted to add that because it's important that the teacher voice that this is not just operational. Very much we're grateful for such a wonderful operational team, but this is something that lives in classrooms.
No, thanks, Jerry. Absolutely, that it is embedded in the learning. It's their story. So David and Suzette, I think we will turn it over to you, I think, as we continue along the path.
Not sure we can take it away after this.
Yeah. Yes, it was what they said. It's good to see everybody today, and I kind of had a sense that maybe before we jump into a couple of other slides, it might be a really good moment just to kind of pause and see maybe people have got some reactions, questions, something that the Montcrest team kind of brought up that has sparked a moment for you. So I'm going to pause do a Zoom pause and let some of you take it away with a question or two.
Andrea, could I just ask a question about the building the ambassador program, sort of how you went about that initially? What were did you have a framework around that, or how did you build your vision of that initially?
Yeah, thank you. That's a great question. Yeah, so when I first came to Montcrest, I just, I put a notice out in first ambassadors meeting, and a ton of kids showed up, and I realized that there was probably many of those students were very interested in being in the club, and many of the students were interested in getting to miss class for open house, to be quite frank. So the next year I said, okay, we're going to have almost like a application to be an ambassador, not a hard application where I was going through and only picking so many people, but I found that the very act of having to say your purpose and why you wanted to do this and fill out, it was quite for a grade 6, 7, 8-year-old kid, lengthy questionnaire, that tended to weed out the people who were serious about taking on this leadership role because it asks a lot of them. Then one of the things that happened obviously with COVID was we had to have virtual meetings, but in some ways, again, because that required the kids to log on after school, we tended to get the kids who were really invested in it. So I think having a core group of students who are really there for the right reasons, and that have a clear understanding at the beginning of the year of what the club is about, because right now it is, yes, about being part of and conceptualizing and representing admissions at events, but there's also a social media piece. And some kids, the thought of like touring someone through the school is anxiety inducing for them, but being creative behind the scenes is their jam. And so it's a safe space for both of those kinds of kids and ambassadors. And I make sure that we give them opportunity to discuss that in a way that they don't have to kind of out themselves in front of their peers, but they can do that through Google Forms and questionnaires at the beginning. So really getting a sense of who do you have on your crew and what are their strengths. And I would really try to avoid picking specific kids for certain things. Sometimes things come up quickly and you do have to cherry pick, but the way I often did it was I would use Jamboards, if you know Google Jamboard, and I would create a different piece in each, a different slide in each jam to represent an event. And then I would have the kids go in, and again, it was their responsibility to go in and put their name on a sticky for each event that they were interested in after sort of talking about what the events were going to be. So again, that is the responsibility being on them. Then I would have, I sort of planned it like a class. So this year, because we had to cohort, usually Ambassadors runs as a 6 to 8 club, but I was actually meeting 3 times a week with grade 6s, 7s, and 8s. And that actually ended up having some positives as well as logistical challenges. But I ran it like a class. So it wasn't just sort of like they came in not knowing what was happening from one day to the next. They had a sense of, okay, over the next few weeks, this is what we're going to be doing. These are the events that are coming up. I would like people who are involved in this to come this day or that day. It wasn't necessarily everybody has to come every single day, depending on what we were working on in the club, or if we had an event that we were prepping for, or if we had videos that we were doing. So I really just tried to keep communication open to them about what was happening weeks out and the expectations of who was attending at which time. There was a lot of what I call eyeball conversations. They're still grade 6, 7, and 8s. I cannot rely on email alone to make sure that they've received it. So I would go speak to them individually, and also always make sure parents knew when events were happening and that their child had agreed to participate, so that it wasn't just the kids saying, yeah, I'm good, and then finding out there was a conflict behind the scenes. Anyway, that was sort of all over the place, but hopefully that was helpful.
Did the kids have any opportunity to generate what the events were going to be, or did you come with sort of a set list ahead of time?
So they had an opportunity to create what they were going to be doing within the event. So we knew we wanted to do a meet the students, but then we thought about how could we best showcase the students, or what role would you take as an open house greeter, or how do you think you would most effectively tour? How can we work out when people started and who we matched them up with? And that all came from the kids. So there was a general framework, but specifically what happened within that framework came from that.
Thank you.
No problem.
Great. Okay. So thanks
can
for the question. Lakshmi, you had another question. Perfect.
I had a small question. Thank you for sharing the journey, the whole Montcrest team. I think it is very inspiring to see how the whole school has come together to present the authentic story. My question is, when a new parent comes in, sometimes there are some challenges the school has overcome over past 2-3 years. So do you also point to the challenges you have overcome or you're working on? Does that form part of the story, or that's too early to present to the parents? I mean, for example, the school I taught in, they had a dynamic admission program. So the whole year teachers were getting new students, maybe foreign students who didn't speak English, or I mean, there were challenges. So do you also in the story point to how the school is overcoming those challenges? I hope I'm
No, that's a great question. And that question was very much driving why we were seeking to tell the most accurate story. So when I arrived at Montcrest a few years ago, there was definitely a disparity between the kind of kids that were there and the program that we were offering, and offering the right support and the opportunity for kids to thrive. So we really, Andrea and I were really trying to dig deep into what does this school do and who can this school serve best? Who's going to thrive here? And I think it had changed so much over time. There's been a lot of leadership change at Montcrest over the last number of years. So the message had been like, and there's people that have been here for a long time and they've got a really secure message that might not be the Montcrest now. So we had to really work on that in order to be able to run an admissions process that would bring in the right people. So designing an admissions process that enables people to know exactly who we are and feel exactly who we are when they go through admissions really helped us to bring in the right people. But we also put lots of practices in place whereby we would find out the right information that we were not exploring before, so that we could know, are we going to be able to support these kids? We have a range of learning profiles, but we can't do everything. And to what extent? So asking the right questions, learning about the family, like that was a massive new thing that we had to do. It was all about learning about them, building a relationship with them, getting the right information from them, and then helping them to make the connection between this is who we are, this is where you are. Is this going to be a place for your child to thrive? And coming to that as a journey rather than just being an assessment and a very kind of one step, the process is very responsive to the family. So it's not just a one size fits all, which is very much what our school is. Our process is very responsive to the family. Does that help?
Yes, that answers my question. Thank you.
So, so I'm David, and this is Suzette, and and I think one of the things we'd like to do as we take this conversation forward today is first of all just kind of identify that, you know, certainly I for the last 17 years have gone on a similar journey as the team at Montcrest in thinking about how do we actually tell the story of our school. When I became with Kevin the director of external relations back in 2005, I really had little idea as to what that job entailed. And we quickly came up with a kind of a short job description, which was, it's all about telling the story of your school and helping other people find their place in that story. And that became a mantra for me, for the team. And I think that still 17 years later is still very much what we believe we're doing in the school. Suzette and I have worked together for nearly 10 years. And as Michael said, we're now moving out of the International School of Brussels into taking some of our learning to support other schools. And I guess what we would like to do today is kind of share with you some of the things that we've learnt and kind of just suggest to you some ideas that may help you in thinking about your school and your context. And the connection really with CGC, obviously, having worked with Kevin for so many years, we go back a long way, and we spent a lot of time wrestling with this question about how do you simplify learning so that it actually makes sense to people. One of the things that is a reality that I still believe is that most parents, most families don't really understand schools, and they understand even less about learning and what it looks like. And our job is to try and make that simple enough for people to understand. Kevin might argue that with the CGC, actually learning so complicated, many educators don't really understand everything about learning. And so this is where things like the definition of learning and the CGC framework really provide us with that kind of framework of understanding that enables us to communicate effectively. And so one of the things that we've spent some of our time doing over the last few years is how do we help families see learning when they walk around the school? So if I just share our screen here. Okay, you can see emails. There we go. Good. So a lot of what we're talking about here is helping schools stand out. And just to be a little provocative, this is what most schools look like. They tend to look all the same. And certainly if you're a parent, and let's say you're a parent in Brussels, looking at international school choices for your child, this tends to be what parents will see. We know that because we speak to parents, and we also know that because most of our websites tend to look the same, and most of the language on our websites tends to be full of cliches that parents don't really understand, but we as educators love. So we do have a problem right from the beginning in standing out, and we believe that actually, even post-COVID, this problem has become more and more accentuated. Because we can't even show different campuses, in the same way as we did, when we were online, we were all looking at kind of learning was suddenly being in front of a computer in your child's bedroom, and that whole differentiation began to kind of be very much more difficult. So we do believe that there is a problem in terms of standing out, and the solution that we're beginning to come up with, and we've been experimenting with for the last few years at the International School of Brussels, is that we believe that the schools that will stand out the most are schools that intentionally design the experience of school. If CGC is really about designing the learning, what we're looking at is all of the other things that go into that experience of being a school. And in the same way, we'll use this example maybe a couple of times through the next few minutes. There is a difference between, one hotel and another, not necessarily because, both might have relatively comfortable beds and a warm shower and a carpet. But what makes one hotel stand out more than the other is often the experience that you have. It's the feeling that you have. It could be even something like the chocolate on the pillow. And, those things make a difference. And what we're really interested in is thinking about what is going to make a difference. And really, we've talked about the power of moments. We're going to come back to that because we believe that moments do make a difference in so many ways.
Exactly. And you might wonder, where to even begin with intentionally designing the experience. Well, we really believe that it starts with looking at the journey that every person in the school is on, whether that is the student, whether that is your teacher, whether that's a staff member, or just the overall family. And we've broken that down into 6 different stages. So it starts all the way from the attraction phase, which is the first moment someone is looking at a school, all the way to basically going through the admissions process, being onboarded, being part of the school, hopefully being retained, and then ultimately leaving, moving on, and becoming part of the alumni community. And so if we break that down even further, and as David mentioned before, when he started working together with Kevin and tried to simplify what his role was within the school, we believe that overall, if you look at the journey, you can break it down into those 3 different buckets of, we need to try to tell the story of the school. We need to help people finding their place in that story and connecting to that story. And then we need to have all these processes, guidelines, and procedures in place in order to make that happen.
So one of the things that, just to add in right there is that depending on your school, you might have different structures. You may have someone called a director of advancement. You may have an admissions manager. You may have someone who is, doubling up as lots of roles, doing alumni communications, admissions, all in one go. I think that essentially all of the people involved in that process for us would be under this banner of story, people, process. That's what we do, telling the story, connecting with people, and managing a set of processes.
Exactly.
And we took that, and I think one of the things that the team at Montcrest mentioned this, and we'd like to kind of share with you a couple of things about that audit that they mentioned, because one of the things that schools have started to ask us is, so how do we know what that experience is? And our answer has tended to be, well, let's first of all look at what's in place. What are you currently doing at every stage of that journey to ensure that that experience is a coherent one, a connected one, that it makes sense? Very simply, does the experience that you're selling on your website ring true on the first day of school? And do you still feel it when you leave the school and you become a member of the Alumni Association? Does that texture, that magic, that sense of who you are? And I think this is where we would also see the connections between some of the work of CGC, what we've seen Montcrest doing, that understanding of having a common language to describe what is happening at different stages. Common language really helps build common experiences because it frames those experiences. And so this audit, 100 yes/no questions, is allowing us to get a sense of where a school is and where they might want to go. And you see just on the right there, that web diagram enables us. This is a school that we worked with where the darker green is really where they were at every stage, having answered the question. And then having set in place a plan, we began to identify where they could get to after 12 months of really managing, curating this experience. And this is not an accreditation, it's not a test, but it is really designed to encourage better conversations. And we're going to just show you a couple of ways in which that has led. And maybe Michael or someone from the Montcrest team will jump in and share at a certain point some of the things that maybe they learned as they went through this process.
Yeah, so we're looking through 3 lenses. And as David said, the audit really consists of around 100 questions, purposely put at yes and no, because people tend to want to say, well, I don't know, and what you want to show is really seeing where some of those differences lie. So the first lens that we look at when we're looking at the audit is story, people, process. And we try to look at it breaking down the respondents into different stakeholder groups. This is different for every school because every school has a different organizational structure. Not everyone uses the language of advancement. Others like to include counselors or their board, but typically we would like to focus on the 3 stakeholder groups, which is the leadership team, the advancement team, and the learning team, and really to identify what type of school is this? Is it a school that is heavily focused on telling the story? Is it a school that is really people focused, or just getting the right processes in place, and then trying to figure out where some of those discrepancies are between the different teams, all to facilitate the conversation. The second lens is the elements of advancement. So if you keep those buckets of story, people, process, each of them consists of 7 elements that we feel make up telling the story of the school, helping people finding their place, and supporting those processes. And what we try to do is determine where is the school scoring high. And so really, what is the school known for? What is at the moment their key strength, and where do they really have space to improve? So where are they scoring lower when it comes to those elements? And then the third lens is the life cycle of school experience. So you saw earlier the kite version. This is the line graph version, because it really allows us, when we are comparing either the stakeholder groups or the average of the school compared to other international schools around the world, it allows us to have a better understanding of where some of those discrepancies are. And in this case, you can understand that we had a very interesting conversation when it comes to the admission stage, or at least that beginning phase of the journey, in terms of why there is such a gap between what the learning team feels is in place compared to the advancement team. Now, in order to dig deeper into that data, we came up with looking into layers of the school experience. So when you look at that life cycle of school experience, those 6 different stages, we broke them down into 3 different layers. The foundational elements. So David just compared it with the hospitality industry. What are some of those basics that are in place? like, do I have a clean room? Is there a hot shower? Then the improvements. So how can you enhance that experience even further? And then what are these moments, these like sparks of wonder and joy that you can put in place that really create a lasting memory for families when they go through your school? And then in order to facilitate that conversation even further, we're looking at where is everyone really aligned? So where can we confirm and be clear about what's really in place? And then what are some of those areas where there was a significant division in opinion? And it's particularly that last piece, where are people divided, which fosters interesting conversations. Just to understand, are there some of those questions where we should be aligned on? And if so, how do we even begin that process?
I'm going to stop sharing my screen here before you may have just seen a hot dog on a screen, and there's a reason for that. But maybe I'm going to cue to Michael. I mean, you went through this audit, and you've been talking about how you tell the story of the school. I mean, where are the links being made for you? I mean, what kinds of conversations did you have as a leadership team coming out of that?
I think some of the keys too is, again, as Natalie said earlier, it kind of reaffirmed some of the work we were doing, the things that were maybe going well, or, you know, our focus on the power of moments and creating moments. And it also kind of shone a light into areas that we thought maybe we needed more work on. So specific processes in terms of how we were organizing things or planning certain things. I think the other thing is it also helped us realize where maybe things were siloed a little bit too much. So where everyone had good intentions and we were working really well in our own areas and trying to do the best job of understanding the Montcrest story and creating that, there was opportunities we saw coming through the audit to improve, you know, how we're working together. So we work together more, so try and begin to work together more closely and plan a better way of making sure that, you know, the admissions team is working with us and Marcom, that we're kind of aligning ourselves. And it's not that we weren't working together before, but there's opportunity to work together even more effectively and to kind of be more connected in how we do that. So I think going through the audit helped to kind of point out some of those things and give us the opportunity to do that. Or there were things that we noticed that where we were working on, but, you know, there wasn't enough knowledge across different areas. So there might be projects that are going on or details that are part of the admissions process that we weren't as aware of as maybe we should have been, or to understand it more deeply, there'd be benefit to us. And then similarly, there'd be things in our area or other areas of the school where if we shared more deeply the things we were doing, the why behind our work and what we were doing, then we could then leverage working together more deeply on those things, if that makes sense. Natalie, did you want to add anything on that?
No, I think you got it. Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of this is, you might put it kind of, where is the story breaking down? And the story breaks down because the systems and structures often that we have in place don't allow that story to really shine through and follow through that parent, the family, as they move through those different stages. And this often we think about storytelling in terms of, you know, do you have a good website? That's only the first stage. And it's really about how does that story then become lived? How do those messages become continuously reinforced at every stage by every member of the community? And our sense is that doesn't happen by chance. It happens with an intentionality attached to it. And this is a key for us in terms of understanding ultimately how you develop and build your brand, your reputation, your enrollment, but also that sense of, you know, when people think about you, what do they say? What do they associate with you at every stage of that journey?
This is why what you just mentioned, Natalie, Mike, and Andrea, it's so important to have that that common vision, that common story, and making sure that what you say throughout that journey is really genuine, and that the teachers feel they can resonate with it, that is the experience that they feel they give the students when they're in the classroom. Because ultimately, if we sometimes look at it from our own different lenses, where we are and where we resonate at what stage of the cycle, but ultimately a student, a parent, even an employee, they are going through that same journey. So this is where it's so important to have that integrated and coherent experience and to be so intentional about it.
Might I add
Kevin.
one more comment? Oh, sorry.
Oh, sorry.
I just wanted to add that the audit also helped us to realize that, yes, there were some things in place for what we were hoping would happen for people's experience at Montcrest, but those some things might not be what we intentionally want to do in order to achieve the outcome that we desire for our students. So the why has to be questioned when we're looking at what actually is happening, and that's really helping us to look at some of our moments that do exist. Like we're doing an audit of all the moments that take place, so we can tell the story of all the things that happen. And then, do we really want those to be the moments for that point in time for a student to grow in that way? So I think driving with the why is really important.
Absolutely. And also where you place it in the journey. Yeah.
Kevin.
Yeah, just always interested in patterns, you know, and I think intentionality is one of the key words that keeps coming out. And it's, I think it's a kind of, we used to talk about the cauliflower principle day, the fractals. I've just been 2 days in a school in Tegucigalpa, lovely school. A lot of what we talked about in the classroom was simply the same kind of intentionality, because there often is a good story, but nobody's talking, nobody's telling it. So being intentional about letting the kids know where we're headed with this, you know, being intentional about finding the best things and talking about them. Because earlier on in the Montcrest presentation, one very pleasing thing to hear was the idea that working with CGC doesn't mean changing everything. It just means becoming more conscious of everything, and then being intentional about understanding the structures and the systems that are going on behind the scenes. And I think a lot of turning a good school into a great one, or a good classroom into a great one, are those things of simplicity, system, visibility, intentionality. I guess it's metacognition about the whole, or about all processes, you know, becoming metacognitive about the family experience, becoming metacognitive about the classroom experience. Because we're always so busy with the what. Then years go by with us working on the what. But to step outside of it, whether it's the teaching experience and learning, or whether it's the whole school experience, everything we're talking about, and just reviewing it in a metacognitive way and analyzing it. And actually, you can make things much simpler than they ever seemed before. So I just wanted to think about, it's not that we're changing everything, it's we're becoming more conscious of what we do and more intentional about what we'll do.
Exactly.
Natalie, I see your hand.
Can't help myself. I just had another thought. It's piggybacking on what David said. I promise I'll stop after this, but it's really important. We had this like, oh my goodness moment through the process of the yellow car audit, the CGC work, trying to uncover like what moments are taking place. And we had this really powerful realization that it's not that there aren't the moments, lots of them are intentional, but there's a very distinct culture around it's not okay to share for different kinds of reasons in our school. But and we you know, we're a K-8, so there's lots of different groups of people in our school, but there's a very big culture of not sharing. Not so much from a, I don't want you to know what I'm doing, but more of a, I don't want to kind of sell myself and I don't want to appear to be bragging kind of thing. And it's a massive thing that we have to work on. And to the point that we're actually not knowing about really important things that are going on. So there's a communication piece, there's a cultural kind of development piece about how we share and what that means and the impact, the why of sharing. But that's something we've really discovered through this process, and it's fundamental to us more moving forward with the moments if we don't work on it.
Yeah, we started at some point, well, we started 2 years ago with our edition of that's called Learning in Action, which is this online publication with learning stories that are, the key focus is our current communities, so our parents, our faculty and staff, but to see what's happening in the school. But part of that, or maybe a bit at the forefront of that, we started creating Monday Wisdom videos. And those Monday Wisdom were 1-minute videos on one particular teacher and the way they were and their way of teaching. And it just captured that in 1 minute. And where initially teachers were reluctant, when they saw that we were genuinely capturing the way they were they were interacting with their students, how they felt about that learning experience for their students with their own voice, with their own words, it actually became almost a great little promotional video for the teachers themselves. So they wanted to become a part of it. And I think there's something about just understanding what the purpose is and feeling the pride rather than being afraid that that they're being criticized or that there is a need for change.
Actually, it worked so well. Most of them have gone on to have different jobs in other parts of the world because it became that promotional tool for them. If you're going to an interview, like this is this is me in action, this is what I believe about teaching, but in a way that was good because it helped. It really was a way of go back to the point at the beginning. Parents don't understand learning.
Do they get it in a new job? Do they get a 1-minute contract?
Yeah, no, but you know, speaking of a new job, it has also been great for us recruiting new teachers.
Yeah.
Because you have and for prospective families to say, here you have our teacher voices, here you have some ECC teachers talking about what it's like with our 3-year-olds, here you have some like a science teacher in the high school, and yeah, we really try to keep it as authentic as possible. And I think this is why that was really one of those that finally, after years and years of trying, we got through.
So what I suggest we do is that we throw another set of ideas at you, because I know that you noticed the hot dog slide, and I do want to talk about hot dogs for a minute. And we're going to, let's say we'll do that for about 10 minutes and allow then some questions at the end for 10 minutes or so, because I think we finish, well, 4 o'clock our time, which is in about 20 minutes. But if I can just go back to our screen here and load up the hot dog. And you might be wondering why we're going to talk about hot dogs and popsicles. So some of this is coming from the book that was mentioned, The Power of Moments. But the first thing comes from a trip to IKEA. And I'm sure that most of you have been to IKEA at some point in your life. And if you have, and you can remember that, you might remember that there are some ups and downs when it comes to that. First of all, you've got to find a place to park. Then you've got to find where your product is. You're up for maybe a 5-kilometer walk around the store. And then at the end of it, I don't know whether it was just me, but there's a 50-cent hot dog. Now, I've got 6 kids, so 50-cent hot dogs are a big deal. And when there's hungry kids, you can actually get 2 or 3 of them each and still, pay for the parking at the end or your flat pack wardrobe. And there's a reason why IKEA offers a hot dog at the end, and it's all to do with the intentionally designed journey. And I'll come back to that in just a second. But they have put that hot dog there for a reason. In the same way, there's a hotel in California that has a popsicle hotline. And this popsicle hotline is a red phone next to a rather mediocre swimming pool in a rather mediocre hotel. But the reality is, this hotel is booked up for months and months on end because of the fame of this popsicle hotline. You can pick up the receiver and ask for whichever popsicle that you want, and within a few minutes, somebody comes with some white gloves and a silver tray with your choice of popsicle for free on the tray, and then you can enjoy the popsicle. And what this hotel has managed to do is create something that is a moment of wonder and surprise and joy that is similar to the IKEA hot dog. And just to show you the kind of theory behind this, somebody actually documented the journey of going through IKEA. And these are some of the kind of moments, if you like, on that journey. And you can see that there's some ups and downs, and that some of the kind of more routine tasks are right down in the kind of neutral or below neutral zones. And the theory is, and there's a lot of theory around this in experience design, is that in any experience, you don't remember everything. You experience lots of things, but you don't remember everything. And the brain has a capacity to pull out and make meaning of very complex experiences. And if you imagine the experience of going to IKEA, how much more complicated is the experience of going to a school or even going to an admissions office with your children? So what the remembering self does is extract what it thinks it should remember. And typically what happens is that it extracts 2 points. It will remember the highest point and the last point. So the most surprising, pleasuring moment at some point, in this case, it's the product trial, when you actually get to have a look at, you know, the new bed or whatever it is that you're going to IKEA for, or you walk into that kitchen area and you find your dream kitchen. That's the highest point of this journey. And the second highest point, the other point that's important here is the hot dog or the ice cream. And that's why IKEA are giving you a hot dog for 50 cents, is because that moment of surprise at the end of a long walk will in fact be the thing that you remember. And what we're trying to do as we think about intentionally designing school experience is, how do you think about how do you actually take that and work that into everything from your admissions experience or your experience for current parents? What kinds of moments are you bringing in that will communicate and connect people to, you know, some of the things that are really important, and they walk away remembering? And just to say that as we build on this, we've started to develop, this is one of the tools that we've developed, which is called the Periodic Table of School Experience, which is a tool that helps teams of schools really think about how do you build experiences that actually have this kind of intentionality attached to it. We're not going to go through this at this point today, but just to show you, excuse me.
Yeah, it's really to see at what stage of the journey do you want to play? What are some of these engines? Who are you designing it for? What are some of the treasures you need? What type of moment you want to create? What is your approach? Are you focused on a product design, a service design, a graphic design? And ultimately, what do you want to achieve? So what's the destination? And what we strongly feel is what really offsets a moment are those intangibles that you see at the bottom. So how can you create that moment of joy or hope or surprise that really gives an edge to the experience that you are creating? Now, I'm not sure how much time we have for this, but here we briefly wanted to talk to you about the shift that we went through at the International School of Brussels over the last 2 years. In a nutshell, 2 years ago, we were your typical advancement team consisting of admissions, communications, marketing, and a development and alumni team. So 3 teams, each headed by a manager, highly specialized. But we realized that we were so focused on our own specialization, we were so siloed that we missed many opportunities to really actually bring that specialism to the table when really looking at the experience. So 2 years ago, we moved we restructured the team and we moved our focus to experience design, where as an advancement team, we were intentionally looking at the experience of families going through the life cycle. And we've broken down the team into those 3 buckets of story, people, process, where we felt everyone was bringing everyone had a key responsibility, but ultimately brought a superpower to the table. So if you take our traditional alumni coordinator role that we had 2.5 years ago, which was someone who came up with a great alumni strategy, had a whole list for communications of emails that needed to be sent out and invitations and graphics that needed to be designed. Needed to connect with someone else who was taking care of the database to update the engagement grid. And actually what happened is this person, even though was responsible for the alumni experience, never really had the full control. And so what we felt with this new structure was, rather than one person having that responsibility, you need to have someone from the story side, someone from the people side, and someone from the process side looking together at the alumni experience. So rather than this alumni coordinator coming to the comms office and saying, this needs to go out now, and the comms office saying, well, that's not going to work because it doesn't fit in the schedule because they already received this email from the director or whatever, you now have directly those people bringing their voices and their superpowers into the table to together create that experience. And what happens there is that if you take someone like you see Alexia right here, so she works with our prospective families, but she also works together with our alumni. So she has a very clear understanding of some of those alumni stories that she hears when she's speaking to prospective families, to give them a sense of the impact the school had on students that have moved on a long time ago. And so this integrated team, what it does is really creates a much more efficient way of working, but people feel so much more empowered because they feel that they are actually really being able to bring their key specialty, their superpower to the table, and finding those different connection points to make sure that overall as a team, we are telling that coherent story. Yeah.
So just to go through a couple of other pieces as we move forward, I mean, I think essentially what we're saying is, as we think about different ways of doing advancement and telling the story, we do believe that there is something probably called advancement 2.0 that is, and you'll see that some of these words again are reminiscent of some of the principles that are so much at the heart of CGC, but we're moving from one kind of team structure to another that is much more based around principles driven, collaborative, integrated, non-siloed or not non-siloed work. Yeah. I think that that's also, as we finish this up, you know, this is what Yellow Car is all about. And I think as we've shared with you some of these things today, we just wanted to kind of take some of that learning that we've had in Brussels and suggest to you that, you know, as if you see Yellow Car around the place and that you know a little bit about what we're doing, we do have a community a bit like CGC. And I do think that we welcome anybody. It's free for people to connect. We have around 200 people already part of this. Heads of schools, service providers, people who have an interest in this area, advancement professionals. And we have some events, and we're delighted that one of those events that's coming up is actually going to be at Montcrest. So there's a perfect opportunity to, if you are near Toronto, to visit Montcrest, and you get some thinking around Yellow Car as well at the same time. So that's it for now, and I'm going to hand back over to Kevin. There may be some comments or questions we'd be happy to answer.
Yeah, thanks, David. Just a couple of comments. The slide you showed with the shifts, I think that's a great thing to make visible. One of the biggest shifts to me, and it's embedded in all of your work, and is even in that last table, is the shift from transactional relationships to transformational relationships. So it's no longer, I send my kid to your school, you get them into university, and I pay you for it. It's, my child's life is transformed. My life is transformed in this school. You can almost put another little shift right across the whole of it, which might be accidental towards intentional, or maybe incidental towards intentional, yeah, or invisible to implicit, explicit, because I think what you're doing is making the shift out from into that metacognitive intentionality, whereas many good things are happening in schools, but it's not accidental because they're happening for a reason, but you know what I mean? They're not systemically intentional. Yeah. So it makes me think about something I share with kids, because we talked a lot when I was in Brussels, David, about the Starbucks philosophy as well, the third place, you know, homework, Starbucks. That's their whole business pitch. And the kids understand why it's so successful, because so what do they do to make you feel at home? They write your name on the cup. What does the K do? gives you a hot dog at the end. These are these simple ideas that stick. And it doesn't really take much. It just takes that intentionality. I just had a wonderful weekend in a small hotel in the mountains in Honduras. What I remember is the people were so incredibly helpful, right from trying to, most times when you phone up somewhere to make a book, they don't call back. This lady called back, and not only did she want us to go, she wanted to know what we wanted to eat for dinner every day. So it's those small moments, isn't it? But trying to make the school the third place, homework, Montcrest, the three places I feel at home, the three places where they know me, the three places where I am somebody. What you always used to say, David, what is the story of the school and what's my place in that story? So just a final thought really with Brooke. This is so good that I think we should somehow do more than simply share the recording, especially because we're heading into the holidays. I almost think we should send it out with a structured proposal for schools to say, because what I want to do now in Honduras is gather together all the relevant people, might be some kids, might be some parents, the PTA, and sit together in a structured way and watch the last hour and a half. So we don't just send it out, but we send it out with a, here's how to use our recordings. We suggest you think about, because I just think this is very, very powerful stuff, and it is transformative. But I'd like to suggest how people might use the recording in a structured way that we might suggest for them. Maybe the Montcrest and Yellow Car, we can think about that. How could we package up the recording with perhaps a set of questions to have in hand while you're watching it, and who might be in the room? Because just hoping some people see it, and you know what I mean, is less than, here's how to use one of our recordings when we send them out. I don't know, Brooke, that could be just a different way to connect with our membership. Because I really think it would be a very useful morning with a representative group from the community to sit and unpack this with a set of guiding questions and pause at certain points and really, really analyze it. I don't know if we could ever pull that off, but you know what I mean? I just don't want it to get wasted because it's so rich with good stuff. But anybody else reacting to that idea or other ideas? Nigel, did you want to say something?
No, I think it's a good idea. I think there's so much good content today. It's a pity that it's a small gathering live, and I hope a lot more people watch the recording, but to enable them to use it more and the way you suggest it, it's a very good idea.
Okay, we'll give it a try, Nigel, and see what reaction we get.
I have just a quick thought, kind of expanding on what you said, Kevin. I think one thing I've learned about my own team, not so much with Andrea, but with another lady that works on our team, is that I sometimes have to ask questions that are very leading to enable them to really understand how this relates to their area of work. It's not always obvious. So I think those kinds of questions are so valuable. I love the idea of having a set of things, but something that's going to provoke the connections between this that they're hearing and how does that connect to my work, and then how can it impact it?
Well, everything's connected. When I think of planning things like that now, I see a learning module in my head. What are we trying to achieve here? What we want them to learn, and then it's an inquiry. So you brainstorm, you brainstorm questions as you would when you're planning for kids, because everything's about learning. So. But that's something for us to work on, perhaps as a team, is to how do we help people inquire into what we just heard in ways that they will get the most out of it. I often find also what I used to do in Brussels, Natalie, when I thought something was important for someone to hear, I would reach across the table and grab them by the lapels. I'd pull them up very close, and it's amazing how much people pay attention when you do that. It's so that's why I don't work there anymore. But I mean, apart from that, And any final thoughts from Montcrest or Yellow Car?
Grateful to have had the opportunity to share. That's a big part of the process, and hope to continue to do it. We've learned so much today, and thank you.
Well, explain, interpret, apply. We understand more when we explain, don't we? So you probably have an even better understanding of your own processes from telling us about it. So, David, Suzette?
No, it was lovely being here and also seeing some new faces for us. And I'm also very excited to actually hear a bit more about what Montcrest has put in place. So I got a little taste of the other side of what's been put in place on the audit. So it was lovely.
Yeah, and I think one of the things we're all doing in these processes is, I haven't heard the word, but it's so much of what we're doing is iterative. On a plane somewhere, going somewhere in November, I said to Suzette, "Would you like to resign from the school with me?" She said yes, and then we said, "What should we call the company?" Yellow car. And the third question was, "So what shall we do?" And I think. So I think this process is a little bit like what the last 17 years has been for me working in a school, is that so much of it is as Kevin always used to say, it's the next best idea, and these things build, and they build because we are connected and we have these conversations, and those become better ideas because of the conversation. So thank you for helping us make our own work a little bit better by giving this opportunity today.
Well, that was really terrific, guys. Everybody can stand. I think that was very powerful, very rich, very full of ideas, huge amounts of learning. I'm going to go speak to the International of Geneva now, so I'm going to head out, and hope everybody has either a nice evening or nice rest of the day wherever you are. But just a huge thank you to Andrea and Natalie, Michael and David and Suzanne, and everyone for being here, Brooke for setting it up, and just keep going. And this is the last of these before the vacation. So everybody have a wonderful summer vacation. We'll come back. We'll be raring to go again for a new school year very soon. So thanks everybody who's been involved
Thanks again.
today.
Thank you for the opportunity.
Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
Bye, everyone.
Thank you.